Welcome, friends, into one of my absolute favorite stories about Jesus. All right, I know that statement did not sway anyone just yet, because the longer you hang out in this room, the more you know I have a whole lot of favorites. You've heard the word sprinkled liberally around conversations before. Pretty much every one of our children and youth is my absolute favorite. That is not an exaggeration. You as a group have already heard that you're my favorite. You're my absolute favorite room to hang out in. At least 2 of 4 Gospels are my favorites. But even among all those superlatives, this is different. This hits different. In every person's journey, first to come to know about, and then to come to feel we actually know Jesus, just a few stories will tend to settle in most deeply. We'll hear a lot of the stories, and we'll retain, the outlines of the details, but a few stories, just a few, will settle into our souls. They are the ones that move us when we first hear them. They're the ones we most clearly remember and most often recall. And they become part of the picture we carry of Jesus. I know that our favorites say as much about who we are, about how our faith operates, as they do about who Jesus is, because the divine and universal Christ is a really vast subject, and each human person has limited range. I have a limited scope. So I admit, this story is probably my favorite just because of the way it speaks to me and because of the way I've come to interpret it. But I don't think any of that is wrong. In fact, I think that's just how human beings work. We're all interpreters who bring ourselves into the process of reading the Bible. The most faithful way I see to approach meaning making there is to stay humble and honest, to try to name the lenses we look through, claim the stakes we hold, see the biases we carry. So to this story, you should know it's an uncomfortable story before it's an uplifting one. And that's important for me to say, because if you feel a little icky in the middle, I just want you to know that emotion is allowed. In fact, it's probably the same uncomfortable emotion, this kind of tension that pops up in a different place than usual in one of Jesus's miracle-working stories, that grabbed me. The uncomfortable is probably what gripped me and held me first. So let's just see how the story hits you. This is Mark chapter 7, verses 24 through 30, reading from the Common English Bible. Jesus left that place and went into the region of Tyre. He didn't want anyone to know that he had entered a house, but he couldn't hide. In fact, a woman whose young daughter was possessed by an unclean spirit heard about him right away. She came and fell at his feet. The woman was Greek, Syro-Phoenician by birth. She begged Jesus to throw the demon out of her daughter. He responded, "The children have to be fed first. It isn't right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." "Good answer," he said. "Go on home. The demon has already left your daughter." When she returned to her house, she found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Okay, I'll own it might be weird that that's in my top 2 of Jesus' stories. Just true. Both of them, incidentally, both my top 2 favorites come from Mark. The other one is just 2 chapters away from this one, in Mark 9, where there is a desperate dad who says to Jesus, "Help me in my unbelief." I love that one too. But then there's this one, this episode of a very determined mom acting as a mom in the world. She impresses me, this Syro-Phoenician woman, and surprises me a little bit. In fact, Jesus surprises me in this one. And I wonder if by the end, Jesus has surprised himself. It's an unusual story. From the start, why is Jesus here in this city? It's in ancient Phoenicia, where Lebanon is today, on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And that's a pretty far haul from Galilee. We all understand that Jesus sometimes seeks solitude and rest, but usually the words say he stays back, he draws away. Is it a little more strange that he goes this far? Were there no closer getaways for the weekend? And why is he all alone? In Matthew's telling of the same story, his disciples are there with Jesus to be part of a big object lesson this same day in this same place. But here, if Jesus is by himself and purposefully incognito, how did this woman so quickly find him? First, she had to find out about him, and then to find where he was to go fall in front of him. My most important question is, why is Jesus so rude? That is not one we're used to asking. But the text says what it says, and the sting of it doesn't really go away. From the NRSV Bible, it says, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to dogs." Yeah, so that doesn't even seem like a pretty picture of a dog. That seems more like Jesus is calling this woman and her suffering ill child stray dogs. He is also declining to help her. Both are completely out of character with the picture that we usually carry around. You know that one, the smooth-haired, soft-eyed, blue-sashed Jesus, who's just all clean and benevolent. He just walks around bestowing healing, right? That's what we think of. I'm honestly not sure why these words are even here. What were they saved for? Why keep them in the record over time? Because dog really does seem to be an unavoidable slur. Doesn't matter what century you're living in, it ain't good. I don't think Jesus is calling the woman dirty or unclean just because she's not Jewish, because the 14 or so verses right before this are Jesus' defense of breaking the laws of ritual cleanliness. They're a lot less important than you think, folks. That was just his message before he drew away. I don't know if Jesus is maybe calling this woman less than or unworthy because she's from a different ethnic group. She's Greek, not Hebrew. Is he slamming her because her people have not been good neighbors to the Israelites? Of course, Jesus famously lifted up Israelites' very worst neighbors ever when he gave us a story about a good Samaritan. I do think if these words could have been smoothed over and softened in translation, they would have been across various iterations and lots of time. All I can say is Jesus just used a dehumanizing word for a person, and I don't know why. I've read commentaries that say this was probably Jesus being funny. This was just said with a wink and a smile. This is Jesus making a joke. And I've read that this is Jesus testing the woman. This is Jesus setting her up, if you will, with this kind of casual brush off to see if she would still express faith he could act on. Or I've read that Jesus, being God, knew this woman had faith inside her, and he was just drawing it out. He was, and I quote a commentary, goading her into expressing her faith. Well, I don't know. Nowhere else in Mark does Jesus slur someone's identity before helping them. Nowhere else can I think of Jesus making jokes with a cruel edge to them. In fact, nowhere in any of the four Gospels does Jesus establish a new protocol of openly judging who is worthy of help. Jesus is much more likely to contradict other people's judgments about who's not worthy. No, said Jesus, neither the man born blind nor his parents sinned. That is not why this happened. So for me, a lot of explanations just don't hold up. But something's going on here that demands some kind of explanation. Something does seem to be happening in this exchange between Jesus and the Greek lady. It seems significant, or why would it be included in the canon of the Bible at all? I think it's left for each one of us to decide. Is this woman passing a test or winning an argument? I think she might just be winning. Now, I am not making the claim that this outsider to the faith taught the rabbi something new or different just now. She didn't change who Jesus was. I don't see that at all. I don't even think she changed the scope of his mission. I do wonder, I just ask out loud, do you think she might have changed the timing of it? Because this woman does get what she's after. She does receive healing for her daughter. And what if, just what if that happened because something in her moved Jesus? The person of Jesus who was and is God. What if in a flash, Jesus changed his mind to take an action he didn't set out to take at this exact time? Maybe with the dog metaphor, Jesus was saying, wait your turn to the outsider. Maybe he was putting her in line behind the very most needy, because you know what? She probably wasn't as impoverished or socially disenfranchised as most Jews in Palestine. Jesus did not say, absolutely not, lady. What he said does sort of lend itself to a reading of, not right now. You gotta wait. But then something changed. Something changed when this mom said, Lord. She looked Jesus right in the eyes, the way I see it. She addressed him as her Lord when that didn't even make sense and technically could not be, because he had no social or religious standing in that town where she was, and he was an interloper. But Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs from the children's table. And something shifted in the atmosphere. If even a dog can beg for a fallen crumb. If even a dog gets to beg and receive bread. What do you think she saw? This woman, when she looked at Jesus, what do you think she saw that kept her speaking when his first response would have shut a lot of people down? And what do you think Jesus saw when he looked at her? Because I'm convinced he stopped and turned and looked. I'm convinced, but Lord made him look her right in the eyes just because she had a ready retort that stopped him short. So what did he see? Persistence? Sure, yeah. Wit or sass? I don't know, maybe those are qualities Jesus really likes. I am hopeful that is true. Or maybe it was just honest, bald desperation that his eyes beheld. Maybe he saw the complete humility of someone throwing their insurmountable problem at the one person they've heard maybe can help. Did he see someone pleading for leftovers because worry and grief had been borne so long that they no longer expected to sit down and eat at a table like a real person? Maybe Jesus saw even a little more. Maybe it was insight that Jesus credits her with when he says, good answer. Good answer. Go on home. From the NRSV, for saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. In Greek, Jesus replies, because of this word you've spoken, or because of this reasoning, you go. Jesus tells her it's logos that she has just expressed. Logos being another name for the word of God. Our determined, desperate mom seems to have recognized something really critical about the particular good news Jesus had been walking around announcing. Somehow, she seemed to speak that there would be enough. Somehow she seemed to know that here with you, there's more. However this system works, new person, here I've heard there's more. This system is ample enough that it can meet a lot of needs at once. In fact, it just might be so abundant that even the leftover bits, the crumbs of this kingdom will be enough for me and my family. I think maybe Jesus looked at that and saw faith. Because who says our most desperate hope isn't faith when we bring it right to Jesus? Isn't that exactly where, in our weakest and neediest and most vulnerable, we should go? Who says that asking for a small speck of grace isn't a giant leap of faith? Whether or not we can articulate a theology, regardless of the confession we've been handed, the doctrines we cling to, if we just start out with our most honest cry, but Lord, offer up our deepest plea, expect to be heard, and are willing to trust whatever we get back. Well, that sounds a lot like operational faith to me. When Jesus says to the Syrophoenician woman, your daughter is already healed, she just walks home. She stops lobbying, she stops speaking, she just goes. I suspect that whatever he had said, this woman was going to take Jesus at his word. Just the way he took her. Somehow, when his gritty words and her gritty words met in the middle, something changed the mind of God. Please don't hear that there's some magic formula in this story you're supposed to pick up on and follow. It's an amazing story, but not like that. I don't think we can just figure out the right proportions of desperate and persistent and then get whatever we need. Like if we're enough, this woman will get our miracle too. I know it's tempting. It's so tempting to lean into that thinking, but God is not a gumball machine. We don't get all the goods just because we put a quarter in. I do think it's an amazing story, and I am claiming it as one of my own favorite stories about Jesus. Not because it makes me expect my own miracles, but because it causes me to remember how much I matter, how much I must matter to God, and how much all people do. If she did, so do I, and so do you, and so do you. Each one of us and everything that each one of us goes through must matter an awful lot for just one of us to turn the head of God incarnate, the way a Syrophoenician woman did one day. For any single human being, especially significantly for an outsider to the first circle of good news, to move God into action. And to me, this just says that the reign of God is something not easily contained. It doesn't want to be quantified and kept in check. It moves of its own will. The reign of God is so abundant, it can sometimes surprise even the word of God. After this story, Jesus' work continues in a slightly different way. He does familiar things like healing and feeding, and Mark doesn't draw much attention to where the things happen, but their geography goes beyond the Jewish world all of a sudden. Reading Mark 7:31, then he returned from the region of Tyre, where he met the woman, by the way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee. Not all the way to, just towards, and went into the region of the Decapolis, a region known for having a highly dominant Gentile population. So the way I see this, one day, a Syrophoenician woman wrestled with God until she got a blessing. And the number of people who benefited went far beyond the one little girl she was fighting for. Maybe you can see why her story is one of my favorites. it still moves me so much that I look for this woman today. I look for this woman every stinking Sunday. Whenever I see someone on the outside showing up, particularly anyone who just keeps showing up in this room, hearing good news, and maybe deciding internally for him or herself that if any of that goodness is true, it's going to be true for me too. I am dedicated to making the good news true for more and more Syrophoenician women. My greatest hope and my deepest prayer is that you'll join me in proving the good news true for more and more people who move the heart of God. So may it be.